Wyoming Territory, 1879. The wind carried grit and the scent of pine through the basin near the Bighorns when Quentin Vance spotted the smoke. He reined in his buckskin gelding, eyes narrowing under the brim of his hat. Smoke meant fire, and fire out here usually meant trouble. He nudged the horse forward, rifle strapped to his saddle, his gut already tight. The cabin was half burned, the roof blackened and sagging. A woman stood in front of it, holding a shotgun that was too heavy for her skinny arms, her dress torn at the hem. Two children clung to her skirt, wide-eyed and silent. Quentin raised both hands. "I ain't looking for a fight, ma'am." The woman's voice cracked, but it held steady. "Then what are you looking for?" "Making sure no one's dying," he said. "You folks all right?" She didn't lower the gun. "You with them?" "No," he said, calm. "I was trailing cattle. Rustlers saw the smoke, thought it might be them again." Her jaw set. "They already came through, took what they wanted, left this." She finally lowered the shotgun, and her shoulders dropped like the weight got too heavy to carry. The boy behind her couldn't have been older than 6. The girl maybe 4. Both had dirt on their cheeks and fear in their eyes. Quentin swung down off his horse. "You got a name?" "Willa Boone," she said, dragging a hand over her brow. "These are my children, Nolan and Nora." Quentin nodded. "Quentin Vance." He looked over the damage. Someone had kicked in the door, ransacked the place, and set a fire on their way out. The barn was gone, just cinders, no livestock in sight. "You got anyone nearby?" he asked. "No family. My husband's dead." "Buried out back," Willa said, cutting the words like they cost her. "We were doing fine, then they came." Quentin looked at her. She was standing like she might fall if the wind pushed too hard, but she still had that shotgun in her grip. Her hands were shaking, her eyes weren't. "You cannot stay out here like this," he said. "I do not have much choice." "You do now," Quentin said. "I got a homestead about 12 miles west. It is quiet, safe. You and your young ones can come with me just until you figure what's next." Willa shook her head. "I do not know you." "Fair," Quentin said, "but I gave you my name. I am not here to take anything from you, just offering help." She looked down at Nolan, then Nora, then the blackened ruin of her home. Her jaw worked, but she nodded once. "All right." Quentin helped them onto his horse, walking beside it the whole way. Willa rode with Nora in front of her, Nolan nestled behind. She never once let go of the shotgun or looked away from the trail behind them. It was near dusk when they arrived at Quentin's place, a modest log house tucked close to the tree line, a split-rail fence running around the corral, smoke curling from the chimney. He had built it himself, piece by piece after leaving behind a life he did not talk about. Inside, it was warm. Clean. Willa sat stiff in the chair by the fire while Quentin set stew to heat. Nora curled up on the rug like she had not slept in days. Nolan sat near his mother, too quiet for a boy that age. "You can sleep in the loft," Quentin said. "I will stay by the fire tonight." "I am not afraid of you," Willa said quickly. "I did not say you were." She looked down, fingers curling in her skirt. I do not know what you want. No man ever offered something without wanting something." Quentin turned from the hearth. "I am not them." She looked at him then, really looked. Her voice dropped. "I have never been touched gently in my life." Quentin's throat tightened. His voice came quiet. "Then I will take my time." Her eyes filled fast, but she blinked it back. "Why would you do that?" "Because you deserve it," he said. That night he gave her space. She tucked the children into the loft, made them a nest of blankets. Quentin kept the fire fed, his rifle nearby, but he never looked toward the stairs. When dawn came, he was still there, boots off, coat wrapped around him. Willa came down with Nora in her arms, Nolan holding her hand. She looked at Quentin like she expected him to vanish, like she had dreamed him. "You got coffee?" she asked. He got up without a word and started a pot. Over the next days, she helped cook, cleaned what she could, mended a tear in his shirt. The kids followed him around the corral, asking questions about his horse, the chickens, how to tie rope. Quentin answered them all. One morning, Willa stood beside him as he chopped wood. She took the axe from his hand without asking and split a log clean. "Was a farmer's wife for 10 years, she said. "I know work." "I never doubted that," he said. They stood quiet for a while. Then Willa said, "You live out here alone?" "I have for a long while." "Why?" "Because peace is hard to come by," he said, "and I do not like people much." She looked sideways at him. "And us," he paused, then looked at her. "You are not people." "You are, Willa." She smiled, small and unsure, but it was the first real smile he had seen from her. That night, after the children were asleep, Willa came down the ladder slow. Quentin looked up from the fire. "I cannot sleep," she said. "Come sit," he said, moving over on the bearskin rug. She did, close enough to feel the heat of him. She stared into the flames. "I keep thinking they will come back." "They will not," Quentin said. "I made sure of that." "You went after them?" she asked, eyes snapping up. "I found their tracks. Made sure they knew what would happen if they ever pointed their horses this way again." She swallowed. "You did that for us? I would do it again." She turned to him slowly. Her voice came small, like it hurt to say. "I do not know how to be with someone kind." He reached out, brushing a piece of hair behind her ear, slow and careful. "Then start here," he said. "With me." Her breath caught, but she did not pull away. "I am afraid," she whispered. "I am not," he said. And then he kissed her soft, steady, like she was something precious. Her hand came up, tentative against his jaw, and she leaned in. It was not wild. It was not rushed. It was the beginning. The chickens were louder than usual that morning, scratching at the frost-bitten dirt near the coop, their feathers puffed against the cold. Quentin adjusted his collar and stepped out onto the porch, boots sinking slightly in the frozen mud. He could hear Willa behind him in the cabin, her voice low and steady as she coaxed Nora to finish a spoonful of oats. Nolan's footsteps thudded above, the boy pacing the loft like he was still learning how to trust a ceiling over his head. Quentin walked toward the barn, jaw tight. Winter was coming faster than he liked. The woodpile needed doubling, and the cow had thrown her calf too early. He'd buried the stillborn himself the morning prior, not saying a word about it when he came back inside. There hadn't been much to say. He was halfway to the fence line when Willa called out, "There's a tear in the boy's boots." She approached with her coat unbuttoned and her braids still damp. "Says his toes get wet when he runs." "I'll bring back leather next time I go east," Quentin said. "Can cut a new sole." Willa hesitated. "I could do it if you show me how." He nodded once. "You ever stitched rawhide?" "My father was a trapper," she said. "I helped dress hides before I could read." That was new. He hadn't known anything about her before she married, only what the past few weeks had revealed: a woman with careful hands and long silences, who watched everything, spoke little, and never wasted movement. He passed her the fence knife tucked in his belt. "We'll cut a pattern this afternoon." She took it without hesitation, turning the blade in her palm like it was familiar. "Quentin," she said suddenly, "you ever been married?" He stepped back, hand on the post. "No," she waited, but he didn't offer more. Later, when the sun reached the edge of the trees, Quentin led the mare out of the corral and hitched her to the sled. He'd spotted a thicket of deadfall north of the creek, enough for 2 days' worth of cutting. Willa stepped onto the porch, Nolan beside her with a scarf wrapped twice around his neck. "I want to come," the boy said. Quentin looked at Willa. She gave a slight nod. "All right," Quentin said, "but you carry your own rope." The boy grinned, teeth crooked, and ran for the shed. As they rode out, the wind carried the scent of juniper and distant snow. Nolan sat stiff beside him, legs not reaching the floorboard. Quentin offered the reins. "Try it." Nolan hesitated. "Mama says I'm too young." "Your hands are steady enough." The boy took the reins with both hands, careful. The mare responded, slow and patient, used to Quentin's voice but tolerant of new weight. They rode in silence, the sled creaking under them, the trees dark and close on either side. When they reached the edge of the clearing, Quentin took back the reins and tied off the mare. "You know how to lash a bundle?" Quentin asked. Nolan nodded. "Mama showed me on the porch rail." Quentin handed him a coil of rope, then started sawing the limbs he'd marked. The boy worked beside him, pulling branches into piles, tying them tight. They didn't speak much. They didn't need to. When they returned, it was near dusk. Willa stood outside, arms crossed, apron dusted with flour. She looked down at the bundles and then at Nolan, whose cheeks were red with cold. "You keep him busy?" she asked. "He kept himself busy," Quentin said. Inside, the cabin smelled of beans and salt pork. Nora was asleep on the bench, her thumb still pressed to her lip. Willa ladled out 3 bowls and passed one to Quentin without comment. They ate in quiet, the only sound the scrape of spoons. After the children were settled upstairs, Willa remained by the hearth, curling the hem of her sleeve in her fingers. Quentin leaned against the table, arms crossed, watching the logs shift in the coals. "I made a mistake once," Willa said. Quentin didn't move. "I married a man because he offered a roof. That was all." He didn't raise his hand at first, not until the second year after the baby came. She didn't look at him. Her hands rested in her lap, quiet now. He stopped calling me by name, just shouted when he wanted something. "I thought that was what life was supposed to be." Quentin's voice was low. "It ain't." She looked up finally. Her eyes were dry, but her mouth trembled. "I keep thinking I'll wake up back there, that none of this is real, that you're not." "I'm here," he said. "I know," she whispered. "That's what scares me." He stepped forward, slow, and knelt beside the chair. He didn't reach for her. "You don't have to be afraid of me." "I know that too," she said. He waited. "I don't know what I'm supposed to be now. No man ever let me be anything." Quentin's voice was steady. "You don't have to be anything but Willa." She watched him for a long moment, then reached out, fingers brushing his wrist. "I want to learn what it's like," she said, "to be held without flinching." Quentin took her hand gently, bringing it to his chest. "Then we'll go slow," he said. "We'll build something that doesn't break." She leaned forward, resting her forehead against his. "I think I want that," she breathed. He closed his eyes and held her hand a little tighter. Quentin found her in the garden bed behind the cabin, bare knees pressed to the earth, a tin pail braced between her ankles. She was pulling out the last of the summer's roots, thistle, carrot, and wild onion, fingers stained with soil, shoulders lifted as if expecting someone to call her back. "You're gonna freeze your hands," he said, stepping off the porch with a wool blanket folded under his arm. "I'll warm them when I'm done," she said, brushing hair from her cheek with the back of her wrist. "Frost's coming earlier than I thought." He crouched beside her, spreading the blanket over her thighs without asking. She didn't thank him, just paused a moment, then went back to work. "The boy's been watching the geese," he said. "Says they're flying low this year." She nodded. "My father used to say that meant heavy snow, the kind that cracks fence posts. You believe it?" "I believe the land doesn't lie." He picked up a handful of pulled weeds and dropped them into the pail. "You ever think of planting again come spring?" "I'd like to," she said slowly. "But I don't know if it's mine to ask." Quentin looked at her. "Why wouldn't it be?" She didn't answer. Her eyes stayed on the dirt, lashes damp with cold. He waited, patient as snowfall. "When my husband died, I buried him with my own hands. The preacher was a week out and I didn't want to wait. I thought maybe that would free me, but it didn't." He didn't speak, just sat beside her, letting her words stretch in the stillness. "I kept hearing his voice," she said, not angry, just there, telling me what I was doing wrong. "Even when I knew he wouldn't come back." She pulled a root clean from the earth, shook the dirt loose. "But lately it's quieter, not gone, but quieter." Quentin took the pail and set it beside the porch rail. "Maybe you just need a different ground." She stood, brushing her skirt. Her fingers were red at the tips, raw along the knuckles. He took her hands gently, wrapped them between his own. They stood like that, her breath clouding soft between them, his thumbs moving slow against her palms. "I've been thinking," she said. "About what you said near the fire." He met her eyes, steady. "I want to learn," she said, "but I don't know how." "You don't have to know," he said. "You just have to stay." Inside, Nolan was carving a length of pine with one of Quentin's pocket knives, tongue pressed to his lip in concentration. Nora was curled near the hearth, singing under her breath, the tune off key but sweet. Willa stepped through the door and lingered a moment. Then she glanced back at Quentin. "Will you show me how to make bread rise in this altitude?" she asked. He smiled, slow and quiet. "I'll show you how to do anything you want." That night she didn't go up the ladder. She waited until the children were asleep, then walked to where he sat by the fire, knees bent, shirt sleeves rolled. She didn't ask, just touched his shoulder and sat beside him. "You don't have to take your time anymore," she whispered. He looked at her, the firelight catching the curve of her cheek. "I want to," he said. "I still want to." She leaned into him, resting her head on his chest. No flinch, no fear, just the slow, certain rhythm of a heart learning peace. They stayed there until the coals sank low and the wind rose outside. Two people, warm in the quiet with nothing between them anymore but choice. The last of the autumn leaves clung to the cottonwoods near the creek, their gold dulled to rust under a slate-colored sky. Willa stood with her sleeves rolled, hands deep in a basin of soapy water, watching the wind move the laundry on the line. The air hung damp and still, like snow might fall before morning. Nolan was in the woods with Quentin, learning how to set a snare. Nora lay on a quilt inside, carving curls into a piece of apple with a dull kitchen knife and humming tunelessly. Willa could hear her through the open window, small, content sounds that didn't ask for anything. It was a kind of peace she hadn't known could exist. She dried her hands on her apron and stepped outside, rubbing warmth back into her arms. The wind carried the faint sound of hooves, and a few moments later, Quentin and Nolan emerged from between the trees, dragging a bundle of kindling behind them. Nolan's cheeks were bright with cold, and he looked up at her with a wide, tooth-missing grin. "I got the knot right this time," he shouted, tossing his gloves onto the porch rail. "That's so," she called back, and her voice rose up lighter than she meant it to. She met Quentin's gaze as he unhitched the rope from the bundle, and for the first time, he looked almost easy. The kind of easy that came after a long stretch of silence had been broken, not by talk, but by knowing someone was just there. Later, after the children had gone to bed and the wind died down, Willa sat at the edge of the bedroll near the hearth, brushing out her hair with slow, careful strokes. Quentin sat behind her, oiling a cracked bit of tack from the bridle. The firelight threw long shadows on the floorboards, and the smell of pine pitch clung to the room. "You ever miss the place you came from?" she asked, not turning around. He set down the bridle piece, wiped his hands on an old cloth. "Don't think I ever belonged to a place long enough to miss it." She laid the brush in her lap. "Where were you before Wyoming?" "Texas Panhandle. Before that, New Mexico Territory. Drifted some. I worked cattle, freight, army contracts. Never stayed." She glanced back at him. "Something wrong with staying?" "Not till now," he said. She turned fully then, her hair falling over one shoulder. "What changed?" He looked at her, steady and quiet. "You." She didn't answer. Her throat worked, but she said nothing. Instead, she reached for the mending basket near the wall, pulled out one of his shirts with a split seam down the side. She threaded a needle without comment, her fingers steady. He leaned back against the wall, watching her hands move. "I used to fix things just so he wouldn't find fault," she said after a long while. "Now I fix them because I want to. There's a difference, but it still catches me off guard. You don't know anyone explaining it." "I suppose not." She tied off the stitch and folded the shirt neatly in her lap. The fire popped, and somewhere above them, Nora turned over in her sleep. "I've been thinking," she said, eyes on the edge of the folded cloth. "Maybe this land could be mine too, not just borrowed for a season." Quentin didn't speak right away. When he did, his voice was low, almost rough. "It already is." She looked at him then, fully, and something in her face softened not with relief, but with certainty. "You mean that? I don't say things I don't mean." She stood and crossed to him, slow and sure, and knelt on the blanket beside him. Her hands found his, calloused and warm, and she laid them against her ribs like she was giving him something instead of asking. "You still want to take your time?" she asked, voice just above a whisper. He leaned in, resting his forehead against hers, his breath warm against her cheek. "Yes," he said, "but I don't mind if you lead this time." She kissed him then, soft, steady, but not uncertain, and when she pulled back, she didn't look away. "I think I could love you," she said. "You already do," he answered, and she didn't argue. She just stayed with him, the fire low, the wind quiet, and the cabin no longer a place they were passing through but home. The first snow came before the end of November, falling thick and quiet over the basin. By morning, the ground was blanketed in white, the fence posts capped like sugar loaves. Quentin stepped outside with a tin basin of grain for the chickens and found the coop door stuck with ice. He worked it open with the heel of his boot, breath curling above him like smoke. Inside, the cabin had a hush to it, like the snow had muffled even the sound of thought. Willa sat at the table, wrapping wool strips around the soles of Nolan's boots with a needle and steady thread. Nora sat nearby, humming to herself as she strung dried berries and pine cones onto twine for the windows. Quentin came in, stamping off snow. "Roof held," he said, hanging his coat near the stove. Willa didn't look up. "You check the stock," cows tucked in. "Mare too, they'll be all right for a few days." She nodded, tying off the stitch and setting the boot aside. "There's stew warming." He crossed to the stove, ladled a portion into a bowl, and sat across from her. "You ever spend a winter this far north?" "No," she said. "Closest I came was Dakota Territory, but we didn't stay long. My husband didn't like the wind." Quentin took a slow bite. "You don't seem bothered by it." "I don't mind what I understand," she said. "The wind's just wind, it's not cruel, it doesn't pretend to be something else." He watched her hands reach for the second boot, fingers red at the knuckles. "You've got a way of seeing things most folks miss." "I spent too long not being allowed to speak," she said, threading the needle again. "Now I listen for what matters." That night, with the fire low and the children asleep in the loft, Willa sat at the edge of the bedroll, brushing ash from her apron. Quentin poured the last of the coffee into 2 tin cups and passed one to her. "I've been thinking," he said, voice quiet, "about the spring." She looked up, waiting. "There's 5 acres on the south end of the ridge, soil's good, gets sun most of the day, I could clear it, build a second coop, maybe even a smokehouse." She turned the cup in her hands. "That's a lot of work." "I've done more with less," he said, "but I don't want to do it alone." Willa didn't speak right away. She looked toward the loft where Nora's small feet dangled over the edge of her blanket, then back to him. "You asking me to stay? I'm asking you to marry me," he said. "If you want it." For a long moment she didn't move. Then she set her cup down, crossed the floor, and knelt in front of him. Her hands found his face, rough palms, cold fingers, and her eyes searched his like she was making sure this was real. "I want it," she said, "but only if you understand what you're getting." "I do," he said. "I'm getting you." "That's enough." She kissed him, tender and certain, and rested her forehead against his. "Then yes." The snow kept falling, but the cabin grew warmer. In the weeks that followed, they moved as one, Willa stitching and planning, Quentin cutting new beams for the lean to heat attach come thaw. Nolan helped stack the firewood, learning how to split pine from fir. Nora sang as she scattered corn for the hens, her cheeks round with health and laughter. In early February, a preacher from the valley rode in under a break in the clouds. He married them in front of the hearth, with Nolan holding a Bible and Nora clutching a sprig of cedar she'd found near the creek. Willa wore a dress she'd dyed with walnut husks, and Quentin stood beside her in clean trousers and a shirt she'd mended herself. There was no music, just the crackle of the fire and the sound of their voices, steady and true. When Willa said, "I do," it was not the voice of a woman hoping for safety. It was the voice of a woman who'd made a choice. And Quentin, for the first time in years, smiled without hesitation. That night, after the children were tucked into their quilts and the embers burned low, Quentin took her hand and led her to the bed they now shared, made soft with wool and feather down. He didn't rush. He undressed her with the same care he used to break a wild colt slow, measured with reverence. And when he kissed her, it was not to claim, but to promise. They made love in the quiet, their bodies learning each other like a map drawn in warmth and trust. No instructions, no fear, just breathe and skin and the slow, certain realization that neither of them was alone anymore. In the spring, the south field sprouted with green. Willa planted onions and beans, and Quentin built a smokehouse from river stone. Nolan carved a whistle from a broken fence rail. Nora caught frogs in the creek and released them near the rows of lettuce. By summer, the cabin had grown by 2 rooms, one for tools, one for the children. The air smelled of wood smoke and bread, and on warm nights Willa would sit on the porch with Quentin beside her, her hand in his, the sky wide and full of stars. They did not speak often of what came before. Not because they feared it, but because it no longer held them. They had chosen something else, chosen each other, and they never looked back.